So it looks like we have another release that I missed out on. Luckily, I have found myself with a little bit of extra time, so it's time to dive into one of my favorite progressive rock bands of, I guess, this current century, while also being yesteryear. We're coming into a very strange time with these types of bands. So anyway, let's dive into this next endeavor. Slow Rust of the Forgotten Machinery, or Where Do We Draw the Line Here, from The Tangent. So, The Tangent has been one of my favorite kind of retro prog groups of this past kind of decade. I really got into their Not As Good As the Book album, and I felt like the second album of that, with the Full Gummit and the first track off of that second disc, was just breathtakingly beautiful. From there, it opened up the door to A Place in the Queue, which has actually turned into my favorite album from the band. I love the opening and closer tracks of this, In Earnest and the title track of Place in the Queue. Both of these essential and standout progressive rock tracks of this current climate, or at least the climate of the time. And all of the tracks that kind of came before and after these were just standout proggy tunes. Now, from here, they have kind of wavered a little bit. Calm, I didn't really connect with. Down and Out in Paris and London, didn't really connect with all that much. Le Sac de Travail, and I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, has become one of my favorite tracks and albums from the group. Just a full-on concept album of the day-to-day working man, and I feel like that was the pinnacle. Like, that was their standout album. The Sparkin' and Ether was a huge letdown for me. And so we come to the next album of this Slow Rust of Forgotten Machinery. And once again, Andy Tillotson, the brainchild of The Tangent, is really at the forefront here. He's been at the forefront probably since Not As Good As the Book. Like that, I felt like, was when it went from The Tangent as a band to more as Andy's kind of creative outlet, which is fine. Like, a lot of bands really flourish with this. And as we've seen within The Tangent, that has worked out very well. Unfortunately, it has started to get into the way, and that's kind of where the Spark and Ether really suffered for me. And unfortunately, we feel a lot of the same things here as well. Now, overall, with the Slow Rust of Forgotten Machinery, I feel as though it's a step forward in the right direction from the Sparkin' and Ether. I feel like the atmosphere is a lot more playful. I know that this is the first album from The Tangent that wasn't mixed and mastered by Andy. And so with that, you feel a little bit of a rejuvenation process within it, but not too much, because the main orchestrated force behind here is still Andy's work. The album does open up with a pretty strong track, which is Two Rope Swings. And this was actually included within a compilation album about these elephants a while ago. I think this was a couple, like last year or something along those lines. And it kind of feels like a one serving bite proggy song, and I feel like The Tangent actually works really well in this kind of a playing style. It forces them to condense and kind of bring out and wring out the essence of the song, and I feel like they did a really great job of doing that on this particular track. Now, the second song of Dr. Livingstone, I Presume, is probably one of my favorite tracks from The Tangent for quite a while, probably since Le Sac de Travail, with being this almost 12-minute long instrumental. And I believe this is really the first fully instrumental track that The Tangent has done. The only problem that I have with this track, though, is that the best part takes place right at the 5-minute mark. And whenever an instrumental piece includes the best part near the middle, for me, there's almost like, well, why do I continue listening to it when I've already heard the best part? What they really should have done was included this particular piece and then reintroduced it at the end, like kind of a second serving of it, and kind of played with it a little bit more. It could have made such a stronger impact had they either condensed the song down to that like 6-minute mark with that really show-stopping piece. I'm just surprised that they didn't do something else with it. It felt like this song is wandering a little too much without really finding a reason for the length, especially, as I said, with the standout piece being in the middle part. It's almost like searching through the jungle for something, as with the Dr. Livingstone, I presume, finding Dr. Livingstone, and then saying, okay, well, where do we go from here? Because we still have a lot more area to cover. So it was very interesting. And yeah, one that I didn't quite connect with as much as I hoped I would. Now from here we go on to the longest track on the album, which is Slow Rust. And I remember listening to a lot of interviews with Andy talking about the concept of this song being multifaceted. And whenever we get into a song like this, it's a little bit of a bogged down. I know it's a lot to take in, a lot to kind of mull over, which is okay, but I think like this could have been separated into two different songs instead of one big epic, because when you provide it within one big epic like this with so many different things going on, it kind of loses focus, and it really loses the impact of any one thing. And yeah, it lessens the enjoyment as well for me, because the big epic finish that I'm expecting never really occurs because there's too much going on. And I feel like this is kind of where we found ourselves within the last couple of albums within the Tangent, which is, a little bit of a drawback. I also don't really enjoy the epics being center in an album. Like, I rather have them at the very beginning or the very end. Being in the center, it really divides the album up. Now, because there's no big epic finish, it feels fine being in here, but that's kind of a testament of the weaker portions of this song as well. From here, we go on to the sad story of Lead and Astatine, where it's just showing the breakdown of a friendship over a long period of time. I feel not quite as connected with this because I already felt like the Full Gummit really tackled this issue and did it very, very well and heartwarming about two people. It's that whole, you either grow together or you grow apart, and I feel like this has already been done and done better. It is the more heart-wrenching song off of the album and one that I probably feel most connected to, but at the end of the listening, I just don't really feel all that, I don't know, it's kind of a forgettable song at the end of the day, unfortunately. Now from here, we come into the song that I think most of us have heard at this point, which is A Few Steps Down the Wrong Road. It tells about this country who's going through this identity crisis. It's really suffering in terms of a political ideology. There's kind of a vacuum that's going on. It's been war-wretched from all around. And it's the rise to power of these not so great individuals, and they never really specify which country it is. And I know that this occurred right after the Brexit campaign or some other really big thing that happened in the UK. At the same time, the US was going through this big political shift within the Clinton and Trump kind of debate and running for office. And I'm going to take a little bit of a tangent myself here, because the biggest drawback to this album is it was released back in June. A full half year, almost a full year after a lot of this has already occurred, and it feels like yesterday's news. Like, a lot of these instances have already passed and gone. Like, sure, the actual theme of the corruption within politics and the scapegoating of minorities and immigrants, sure, that's still relevant, but the face that was put onto it became very time sensitive, and I think we've already expired that. If they had chosen instead to just talk about the issues without putting this face to it, I feel like it would have been much more impactful and given more weight to the message that Andy's trying to get across. But by making it so timely, it puts an expiry date on it, and I feel by the time this album was released, it's kind of expired, so the impact isn't as hard-hitting. Now, returning to A Few Steps Down the Wrong Road, this is kind of where that is felt the most. It was felt a little bit within the Slow Rust, especially when they're comparing all these different things, like the Clinton and Trump. Like, you're either on the Clinton side or on the Trump side. Well, fortunately now, that's not quite, the environment that we find ourselves in now is a little bit different. But within A Few Steps Down the Wrong Road, this is kind of where I felt like they could have grabbed on and done something really special. And I mean, they do. Like, they do that kind of switch and that Shyamalan with a twist at the end of the song. And I do enjoy that aspect of it. Like, I felt like that was really pointing the finger at the current climate. But it is kind of underhanded with that timeliness. Now, the biggest drawback that I have to this, unfortunately, is also the inclusion of Holst's Planet Suite, especially by using the Jupiter suite within this, because by using that, it took me out of the music, because immediately I'm like, well, that's Holst. Like, why are you using this theme from a already beautiful piece of music? Especially Jupiter. Like, Jupiter is the bringer of joy. And when you're tackling a concept of this, of like the atrocities that you could be going through, and especially within that What a Twist, the atrocities that happened, do you really want to pair that with Jupiter, the bringer of joy? Like, are you trying to say, like, this is the joy that these individuals are having by destroying millions upon millions of lives? Is this the joy that we're having? Like, there's cross metaphors going on here, and I don't know why that happened. I know Andy's not intentionally doing this, but I also know that he's an intellect. Like, I know he's a very smart and brilliant man. So I'm wondering, why Jupiter? Like, why not Mars, the bringer of war? Like, that makes a lot more sense, because war is what followed. War is what we're seeing. Like, why Jupiter? Why not Mars? I don't know. It left a really bad taste in my mouth, and one that I just was like, I needed to clean my tongue out. Anyway, getting ahead of myself. Overall, this album is it's a mixed grab bag, but it's better than the last one. Whereas the last one was not necessarily a mixed grab bag, it was just all around bleh. This one at least has some moments that I can latch onto, and I look forward to listening to again. That middle portion of Dr. Livingstone, I presume, as well as the sad story. These guys, it's enough to bring me back, but it does remind me of years gone by. Overall, unless you're a fan of The Tangent, I would actually recommend probably skipping this album. This is an album that only diehard fans of this style of music, like if you're really into this type of retro prog, and you're craving for something that's very similar to, say, like the Flower Kings that haven't put out anything in a very long time, or you're coming off of Neil Morse's album and you just need some new material, this would probably wet your whistle for that, and I'd probably recommend to stream this. But for the overall average listener, this is a forgettable one, and one that you would probably need to skip. It's a little bit unfortunate, because this is coming from one of my favorite retro prog bands, and I really wish to have that brilliance that I found from In the Queue, from Not As Good As the Book, from Le Sacre Travail. So anyway, what did you guys think? I know this album's been out now for about 3 months, so it's had a bit of time to digest. So where are you guys with this album? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Whatever you thought, let me know by commenting down below. Thank you guys, as always, for watching. You guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.
The shining bounds increase, and the sound bites are of gentleness, and their weasel words are peace.